what they're trying to do is intimidate and instill fear in journalists that cover issues that reflect poorly on this administration. Because that's exactly what they're doing. The legal phrase for that is called a chilling effect, which means you're deterring certain activity. So you may think, okay, well, how's that a chilling effect? Well, he's a very high-profile, well-known journalist in the country. Even if you don't like him, you know who he is. And that sends a message. Any other journalist out there that's thinking about covering something that's negative to this administration or portrays them in a negative light, you have to know they're second guessing themselves. What's good, people? You may have noticed I'm shooting from a different location based on the last couple of podcasts. I'm in a part of my house I call the club room. Now, initially, I did the whole podcast studio thing, but, I want this to be more relaxed, a vibe that's more consistent with my style and where I'm comfortable. And I call it the club room. Everybody, or a lot of men rather, have their version of a man cave in their house. Some people have like a room that's designed with football jerseys or some other kind of sports memorabilia. Some people want a big pool table or a bar. For me, the vibe I like is more of a updated, modern version of the old school gentleman's club. Where the businessmen would go, in old time London, where they would go after work to discuss business and have a scotch or a cigar in a private club with the dark leather chairs and scotch, your cigars, your wine. That's the kind of the vibe I like. That's the vibe I like, where I'm comfortable, and that's what I've got set up here in the house. So we're in the club room. That's where we're going to be shooting, and excited to make some changes, some more changes. As you've seen, every other podcast, it's always just me, and I'm just in here talking, giving my perspective, gobble gobble gobble, legal mumbo jumbo, just cracking myself up. But I think that as lawyers, it's important to remember that although in our mind we're hitting on all cylinders from a legal standpoint, we need to keep the perspective of the non-lawyer. Because, if we try a case, the jury's not lawyers, they're non-lawyers. And it's important and we often forget to think about the questions the non-lawyers may have or the perspective they may have, because we're so caught up in the legalese in our own mind that we forget about things like that. And I'm taking that same approach to the podcast. I want to make sure that when I talk, I'm addressing the types of questions that non-lawyers may have. And I think that's a lot better, a lot more informative and educational for everyone, and a lot more enjoyable for me. So in that scope, we have a guest with us today. Her name is Kayla. I'm excited to have Kayla as part of the team. She'll be asking the questions that you want the answers to, and I'll do my best to answer out of the questions that you have that she's going to ask. So none of this is scripted. I'm on the hot seat, but hey, that's where I thrive. So I'm good with that. And hey, I may not have all the answers, but we'll never know. So Kayla, welcome to the club room. Remember, mi casa es su casa. I would ask you how you're doing, but nobody really cares. What they really care about is what's going on with the arrest of Don Lemon. So why don't you give me those questions?
I agree, and thank you, John. So first, let's start off with, why was he arrested? What exactly are the charges against him?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question when you say, why was he arrested? From a technical standpoint, from a legal standpoint, the charges are federal charges for conspiracy to interfere with a person's exercise of their First Amendment right to religious freedom. That is a technical charge. Now, is that why he was arrested? Of course not. And I want to be clear that, when I give legal responses, I truly try not to make my responses political. Everything is crazy. Everything's political nowadays. Like, you can't have an opinion on anything without it being deemed as, you're on one political side.
I agree.
And I hate that. But I have to say that although that is a technical charge that he was arrested for, That is not why he was arrested. I've done numerous podcasts addressing how this Department of Justice has shifted, become the president's personal hit team, where what you've seen is drug dealers being, pardoned. You've seen, politicians that have been indicted being pardoned. You've seen financial criminals being pardoned. And what you've seen is anyone that is favorable to this administration basically gets a get out of jail free card. But anybody that this president perceives as a political opponent or someone that slights him or someone that publicly opposes his agenda, well, now they're a target. You've seen that with the former head of the FBI, James Comey. You've seen that with Letitia James, who prosecuted his company in New York for the civil fraud charges. And you're seeing it with Don Lemon. And that's why he was prosecuted, because Don Lemon is a journalist who's been very outspoken about his disagreement with this administration. And as you know, what's been happening in is it Minnesota or Minneapolis? Where's
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I mean, that's been a real flashpoint for what's going on in this country. That it's made the administration look pretty poor, because 2 people have been murdered. There've been a lot of protests, and they've kind of lost control of that narrative. They're losing control of it. And he was covering one of the protests. And the thing about it is, on the video, he's making it clear he's there as a journalist. He's interviewing people from both sides. He's not just interviewing, and just so we're clear, he can interview whoever he wants to. He doesn't have to interview it, from both sides. I mean, you can, be a biased journalist if you want to. That's your decision. But he's interviewing people that protest. He's interviewing the pastor who was an ICE agent or ICE employee. So, and he makes it clear that is what he's doing. And to give you some context about his indictment, when Renee Good was shot, killed by the ICE agent, this administrator made it clear that there would be no investigation. Literally, they made that very, very clear. There will be no investigation into whether or not this woman who was shot in the head in her car was a victim of any type of civil rights violation. However, they made it clear they would investigate whether or not the officer who shot her was a victim of her assault, which is insane. Now, you take Don Lemon. Don Lemon covers a protest as a journalist, something that journalists in this country have done forever. Journalists all over the world. I mean, every time there are protests in any country, I mean, journalists cover it. That's news. That's the whole point of news. And that what people may not know is before he got indicted, the Department of Justice actually went to a federal magistrate and tried to get a criminal arrest warrant for him. And the magistrate denied the arrest warrant because, for obvious reasons, that he was a journalist covering a protest. So despite that, within 11 days of him covering this protest, his case gets taken to the grand jury and he's indicted, which means that ultimately they were determined to come up with some reason to charge and arrest this individual. And again, to reflect and refer to prior podcasts I've talked about, that's exactly what you've seen this administration do. They'll decide, hey, we want to arrest that person, we want to target them, and then kind of figure it out later, as opposed to really investigating whether a crime occurred, whether or not it's something that's worthy of prosecution, and trying to conduct an investigation. They kind of, fire and then figure out the whole AIM thing. But they were clearly determined to make an example out of him. And I'll tell you what they're trying to do to give you a further answer to your question is, They're thinking, man, if they're going to come after me, do I need to watch what I say? Is this really kind of worth it? And that's called a chilling effect, because that's what they want to do. They want to deter and intimidate and cause fear in journalists from reporting things that reflect poorly on that administration. And the thing is, some people might say, well, what's the big deal? If you're innocent, what do you have to worry about? Well, here's the whole thing about it. Being indicted and being arrested is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what's going to happen. There are plenty of people in prison for crimes they didn't commit or for what may be considered trumped up charges. And you kind of have to know if this administration, this Department of Justice goes after you. If you look at how they handle situations during the court process, I mean, they have a history of not listening to judges, defying judges' orders, doing what they want to do, deciding these rules don't apply to them. And you kind of have to know, first of all, in any criminal case, it's scary because you still got to hire a lawyer. You kind of got to pay the freight. Once you get indicted, you got to get defense. And so either A, you're getting the public defender, which nobody wants, which is, and they do a lot of them do a good job, but they have limitations like anybody else. But most people want to hire a private lawyer. Well, you think about it. If someone comes to me, if Don Lemon comes to me and wants to hire me, yeah, I think the charges are trumped up. I think the case is crap. I think it's absurd, but I still got to put the work in to defend him. And if you're defending Don Lemon, you have to know this administration is not going to try to work with you. They're going to try to stick at you every single chance they get. They're going to make you work 10 times as hard to get discovery. They're not going to try to cut you any deals. They're going to probably hide evidence and misrepresent facts and truth and things like that. They're going to make you work 10 times as hard as you would on any other case. So even though you believe he's being treated unfairly, guess what that means? I mean, I got to charge him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is going to be, to defend this case, $500,000-$600,000 minimum legal fee if he's lucky, Yeah. And so you got to deal with that and the uncertainty and the way it upends your life. So, and people understand that and do not want to deal with it. So that's why he's being prosecuted, because that is their goal.
Okay. And so going forward with that, like you said, he was there as a journalist. He was not there participating in the protest. How did he interfere with the protest or the worship in the church? And what kind of legal power does his statement of he was there as a journalist, not protesting, have? Well,
he wasn't interfering. I mean, that's the whole thing. Now, of course, the Department of Justice in this case, what they're going to do is they're going to say he's a domestic terrorist, which is what they say to anybody that shows up at a protest. They're going to say he's a domestic terrorist, and these fine people were, trying to enjoy and exercise their First Amendment right to religious freedom in this country, and he was there to interrupt that. And I want to be clear, that federal statute was not designed for this scenario. What it's designed for is when there's a true legitimate attempt by individuals to interfere with other religions and other religious activity, So let's say you have people that, have an issue with Muslims, and they start, blocking the entry to mosques, or let's say that there are people that are, threatening to, making bomb threats to synagogues because they're trying to attack people that practice the Jewish faith. That's what this statute is designed for. Okay. And they know that. But what they're doing is they're trying to come up with some legal theory by which they can indict him. And the fact that he got indicted by the grand jury, I want to address that, because some people may think, well, the grand jury indicted him, so that must be some merit to the case. Mm-hmm. Nothing could be further from the truth. Okay. And I said the same thing when Trump got indicted for his crimes for which he was convicted. Mm-hmm. Hey, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. That is a very well-established legal phrase, because the grand jury process is a secret proceeding. The prosecutors decide, okay, we want to indict somebody. We have our grand jury panel, and we're going to decide what evidence we have, and we're going to present it in the light most favorable to us, mm-hmm. and we're going to put up witnesses, say what we want to say. There's nobody there to cross-examine them on behalf of the defendant. The defendant cannot present evidence. He can't make legal arguments. It's just us telling the grand jury, these lay people, that, hey, we have evidence this person committed a crime. This is what they did. This is the statute. And as long as a certain percentage of the grand jury says there's probable cause, you get your indictment. That's how you get an indictment. That's why, that phrase comes about. You can get a grand jury to indict anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, him stating on the video that he is there as a journalist covering the protest is clearly, from a technical standpoint, strong evidence that he was exercising his journalistic First Amendment right as well.
Mm-hmm. And so with those First Amendment protection rights, how is this going to affect journalists in the future? Do you think that it's going to create this huge fear factor to where it seems like if you're holding a camera, you're legally holding a protest sign? Do you think people are not going to want to report on protest anymore after this if he loses the case?
I think, as I indicated earlier, big picture wise, anytime a journalist or reporter is covering something that shows this administration in an unfavorable light, they'll be concerned that they'll be a target of a criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. And this administration knows that. When you think about it, and overall, you look at the big picture, like I said earlier, he's not just done this against journalists. He, the person that prosecuted him and convicted him, he's done the same thing. Mm-hmm. Because he wants to send a message that, hey, if you prosecute me, I'm coming after you. And in the case of the Letitia James, I mean, when you look at what they tried to indict her for, 30 years ago, she applied for a mortgage for some property, and they're trying to say she misrepresented whether or not it was going to be for personal use or vacation use. Okay? So do you think that's just a coincidence? You think that the Department of Justice just happened to start, looking through her mortgage records from 30 years ago? No. Mm-hmm. What happened is the president said, hey, here's the deal. You go get that bitch. You find something. And they go, okay, well, let's look through her tax returns. Let's look through her mortgage applications. Let's look at all the real estate she owns. Let's look through her bank accounts. Let's see if we can find anything out there to make a legitimate argument that she somehow committed a crime. That's what they did. And that's what they came up with. Hey, and the same thing with James Comey. The only thing they could come up with James Comey was, hey, he gave some testimony before Congress about the January 6 hearings that, they felt like he wasn't being honest. And so that's what they could find with him. So they went out, they used that as the means to go after him. And again, so that's what's happening. What they want to accomplish is that chilling effect that, hey, you don't come after us. You portray us in a bad light, we're coming after you.
Do you think realistically that Don Lemon's case goes to trial?
Yes. Well, I think realistically, I believe a judge will dismiss the case. Okay. I believe a judge will dismiss the case. And, again, I'm alluding to prior podcasts. I've talked about this administration. They have seen that happen in cases where they've made these, political hit jobs, mm-hmm. where instead of truly looking at the evidence in the case and determining whether or not there's any real merit to it, they just indict the person, which is why when he went after James Comey, what happened? That case got indicted. When he went after when he indicted James Comey, that case got dismissed. When he indicted Letitia James, that case got dismissed. Because what he's doing is he's instead of getting, career prosecutors, federal prosecutors that and letting them do their jobs, he's putting people in place that have no qualifications, have very minimal experience at anything, and saying, hey, I'm hiring you. First thing I want you to do is indict this person, indict that person. And they're just saying, okay, boss, without really knowing what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's why these cases are getting thrown out. And honestly, I don't think they care if he gets convicted or not. That's just their way of saying, something, we're going to fuck with you. That's right. And yeah, even though the case might get dismissed, you still got to deal with it. You still got to pay the freight. You still got to pay the friggin' lawyer out of your pocket, write that big check, deal with the stress of it, be arrested, be booked, go in front of a judge, and still worry about going to jail and whether or not there's something you got to deal with the next 2 or 3 or 4 years of your life. And guess what? What they're going to do, I can guarantee you, because this is the pattern. even if and even when I believe a judge will dismiss this case, you know what they're going to do? They're going to appeal the decision. So that's what they've been doing, and I can tell you the other thing they're going to do is they're going to attack the judge. But because you've seen that pattern. I mean, and it's just, these are facts. I mean, whether you, pro or against, that's not even relevant. But if you look at the pattern of this Department of Justice, anytime, and it hasn't been criminal cases, it's been civil cases where their administrative action has been challenged by judges and judges ruled against them, saying they've exceeded their authority or they acted in in a manner that contravenes legislative intent of the law. Anytime the judges, federal judges, have ruled against them, you see them attack the judge. Judge is corrupt. The judge is crooked. You've seen them, threaten to have judges impeached, to have judges removed from the bench. File, bar complaints and ethical complaints against these judges. That's their playbook. So I can guarantee you that's how this is going to play out. So even if the case does get dismissed, Don Lemon's going to be paying legal fees for the appeal.
Do you think this outcome would have been any different if he was still a major reporter on CNN?
No. I think he would have been just a bigger target because this administration has made it very, very clear over the years that they don't like CNN. They don't like the way they're covered on CNN, and they will attack that particular, media outlet.
Is there anything you think that Don Lemon could have done differently to protect himself from this arrest?
Oh, yeah. He could have wore a hat that said, "I love Trump." That would have been his best defense. Because everyone else that is taking that position gets a get out of jail free card. You may recall the New York mayor who got indicted for corruption charges prior to Trump being elected, big Trump supporter. And despite being indicted by the Department of Justice, as soon as Trump gets elected, the Department of Justice decided that they didn't have enough evidence to move forward with trial and they dropped the case.
I actually did not know.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, there was some controversy because in their first statement to the court, because federal court is different than state court. Federal court, you can't just, in state court, you can just say, well, we're going to dismiss the charges. Federal court, you can't do that. You've got to apply to the court to withdraw these criminal charges and explain why. And the first time they did that, when they applied to withdraw the charges, they put in their application or their petition that it was more important for this individual to have the time to assist in executing the President Trump's agenda. Literally, they put that in the petition. Where do you think that came from? Okay. Mm-hmm. And on the side note, that also exemplifies what I mentioned about having people that are not qualified. No qualified federal prosecutor would ever put something like that in a pleading, because what you tell them the court is, we decided not to prosecute this case for political reasons, which you cannot do. That's not how it works. Yeah. And then when the judge rejected that, they said, oh, well, we decided the evidence wasn't adequate. And he said, well, wait a minute, you're the guys that indicted him in the first place. So now you're saying you don't have adequate evidence. But that's exactly what I mean. So when you think about, some of the financiers that scammed people out of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, when you think about the drug dealer that got pardoned, what they all have in common is they've indicated a desire to help execute and carry out the president's agenda. And, so I would say if Diddy, wants to get out, you'll be looking for Diddy to wear a MAGA hat in prison and put that on his social media in prison. He'll be out of jail in no time.
Let's hope.
Well, I think that's all I got for today. That's all we have for today. Horrible habit I have of saying I all the time. My wife tells me, my house, my car, my money. This is we. So that's all we have for today. I want to thank Kayla so much for being a part of this process with me. And I think they're probably going to like you better than they like me, which is not difficult to understand. Now, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe so you get all my legal opinions and updates on the hottest legal issues that are gripping the nation. And of course, you may not agree with what I'm saying, but I really don't give a damn. But I would appreciate it either way if you post your comments and call it like you see it. That's it. Well, that's all I got, but I do appreciate you taking the time to join me on this legal deep dive. I think it's always fun to discuss these topics, tell you what I think, and get your feedback. I would really appreciate it if you took the time to like the video, subscribe to the podcast, and also I'd appreciate you sending me your comments so we can discuss the topics you want to hear about. That's it.